So, John, recently we were chatting about some podcast ideas, and you had flipped me an episode from the Freakonomics podcast, and you said, you got to listen to this. It covers so much great ground, and it was an episode. It's called Are Personal Finance Gurus Giving You Bad Advice? Right away, like, I think what probably intrigued you to listen and what intrigued me to listen is that title. Like, I go, oh, shoot, like, I don't want to consider us financial gurus by any means, but I'm like, I wonder what they're saying in there. And I wonder, like, are we on, are we getting called out, right? Like some of the things we're saying, and ultimately
maybe
listening 100%, like, but really what I loved about this episode, as we went through the whole thing, it's a long episode, a full hour. And I just recently finished it. And I said, you know what, let's hit record and let's chat about this, because I think it's so difficult. We've talked about it. And really what this episode is kind of like a really good overview of a lot of the things we bring up on the show quite often, where you and I are always talking about rational. I call it rational Kyle and emotional Kyle, right? And really everyone's got that.
There's two sides.
It's the angel and the devil on your shoulder, right? Like the financial angel and the devil on your shoulder. Like you've got, like, basically the angel is like the rational one. Like it's the one, like, do the right thing all the time. And like, if we lean on research, we can lean on the data. And like, if we just did that, it would be better. But then on the other hand, we've got this thing on our shoulder. The devil here is the emotional side. It's like the behavioral side that we tend to, like, find ourselves trapped in, and we go, oh, crap. And we end up doing, I don't want to call it the wrong thing. It's like, it feels right at the time, but it's certainly not what the research says is right, according to the numbers in many cases.
Yeah, I think what you're like, and there's actually like psychology, like behavioral economics behind this, which is where the the podcast talked about. But we've read a bunch of research, a bunch of books on this very topic, and it brings up a few things. But one, what you're talking about is, like, there are financial decisions we all have to make, and there's the math that says do it that way, and then there's the emotion that says, like, I did it this way, but it's not what the math said. And I think that's what we're talking about here. And so.
And you probably don't tell people about it either, right? Like, you're like, I did that, and I'm not going to tell anyone.
I do it like this, but then they're like, oh, but somebody else might be like, well, the research says, like, the math says, the historical returns say, like, do it like that way. But then you're like, oh, I didn't do it that way. So, like, when you're saying the devil on your shoulder, like, where the devils really come from, in my opinion, is basically from, like, Daniel Kahneman's work in Thinking Fast and Slow. Like, there's two sides of your brain that you could, like, everyone has, like, it's psychology. Like, you have two sides of your brain. You have your quick side of your brain, which is your emotional side of your brain. You have the slow side of your brain, which is your rational side of your brain. You're careful, your analytical side of your brain, and you're constantly battling. Here's the problem, right? The problem is you think you live on the rational side of your brain, but 90% of the work, the things you do is on the emotional side.
100%.
It brings up another resource that we heavily rely on when we're trying to coach people and thinking about shifting habits. Because that's a lot of what we end up doing with our clients, is like, the habit is where things stick. The math might say this, it might say that, but it's like, what can we commit to? Because that's the gap between the math and the rational side. But it brings up, like, a framework that we often think about, which is actually from the book Switch from Chip and Dan Heath, which is a book about how to change when change is hard. And they position those two sides of our brain in a way that kind of gives us a nice framework to work on. Because what they say is, like, you have to imagine that any decision you want to make, or any pathway you want to go down, or any change you want to make in your habits lies inside the jungle. And there's an elephant and a rider, and they're trying to go down a pathway. And at the end of the pathway is the shift, is the change, is the habitual new moves you're going to make, or the financial choice that you want to commit to. The elephant represents your emotional side of the brain. And if you don't want to, like, if the elephant doesn't want to go down the pathway because of fear, because of worry, of social implications, or, I can't sleep at night if I go down that pathway, you're not going down the pathway. Right? The rider is the rational side. So that's, like, you can see the physical difference. This is why this is a nice framework, is because the physical difference here represents the barrier you're up against. The math says go down the pathway. The rider's like, I want to go down that pathway. And the elephant's like, there's no way I'm going down that pathway because there's a mouse over there.
Yeah.
And I'm going down this pathway over here. So the framework is, like, you have to motivate your elephant. You have to, like, get around that the elephant is going to do what it wants to do, But you have to battle that. You have to realize that. And a lot of times we just don't realize it. Whereas the rider is saying, go down that path. And the other third part of the framework is the path has to be clear. It has to be easy. And that's where the habit parts come in. And so there's like lots of things in this episode too that kind of are that we want to unpack. But that's an important framework to consider as you're kind of battling this, like the math says this, but behavior says this. And there's a gap between those two things.
100%. You laid it out so well. And if you look at it, there's so many aspects of life that we can apply this to. And I want to bring it all the way to like financial decisions that we make and the wealth building decisions that we make or don't make. But like, I always start with exercise and health, right? Like, it's like, we know rationally what will be healthy, like what's going to help us do what we need to do, right? We eat less bad things, we eat more good things, we eat less in general, right? Instead of eating more, and we exercise more. But the problem is that a lot of those things, sometimes the elephant gets in the way, right? Like in the morning when you're like, shoot, I got to get up and put these shoes on and get, and I got to go for the run or the, whatever it is that you're going to do. That's the elephant. Like the elephant there is like blocking that for you.
Elephant,
right?
I'm not doing that.
Now, if we fast forward and we go all the way over to like financial decisions and wealth building decisions, right? So the rider is saying, okay, listen, find the the asset that's going to give you the greatest return over time, right? So right away, we're going to lean on like S&P 500. Again, that's may not necessarily be the best return, but it's a consistent one, right? And we go, okay, on average over, historically, it's like, hey, we believe in the US and so forth. And assuming that continues, right? At some point, maybe the US isn't going to be the greatest world power again. I don't know. We don't know when that is. But assuming everything in the past is true, we just take all of our extra money and we just put it in there. Like, just do that. And rationally, the rider's saying, like, that should work out well for you. Notice the keyword should. There's no guarantee here, but it should. But people don't do that. And like, even we won't do that. Why? Because it's like the elephant is like, I don't know if that's going to work, right? And like another financial example that's really important. Like, we have so many people that contact us about the Smith maneuver, and we love talking about it. I think it's such a fantastic financial tool, especially for those who have high net worth or like they're experiencing high tax brackets at a personal level. Smith maneuver is so fantastic. So we have so many people that learn about it. It's the rider right there. It's like, I'm going to learn all about this. Make sure, oh man, I can invest right off the interest on borrowed funds. All of these things happen, but then know what happens when they get to the place where they're ready to do it. When they actually go to do it, the elephant shows up, and the elephant sits there and goes, what if? Like, what if right now the AI bubble pops? Like, I don't know if you've been living under a rock, John, but there's this thing called AI. And right now there's like all of this noise out there that the AI bubble is going to be like the 2000 bubble when the tech bubble, the internet bubble popped in 2000, right? My parents held shares in a company called Nortel. Most Canadians who were around back then know about Nortel. Nortel was a spin-off company from BCE, which was Bell Canada, and that stock went to zero. My parents were like riding that thing up, and they were like, oh man, this is amazing. Boom, it's gone.
These are the playing reasons. The stock game in my business class back then, and we were all putting money, like,
Nortel?
You had fake money, and it was like Nortel was the place to put your money.
Yeah. For me, it was BlackBerry, right? So like myself, I was like, hey, BlackBerry, this thing, like, I didn't even have a phone at the time, but I was like, there's this thing like BlackBerry is going to be amazing. And I put some money, very, very small amount, basically like a weekend dinner of a version amount of money in there, and saw that thing go all the way down. So that's what gets the elephant going, right? And like, the elephant is the thing that sort of like stops us from being able to go down that path. And this is why it's so important for us to not only understand, so like help the rider to better understand the whole financial picture, but we need to do things that are going to be manageable to do. And you're talking about like the habit, right? And like clearing the path. So sometimes I'm going to put certain funds in certain places if I know I can do it and I'm willing to do it. Like, so for example, I'm not a big dividend investor. We've talked about on the show why dividends is kind of like a bit of a farce. Like, it's like, hey, I got $1 dividend per share on this stock that's worth $100. But as soon as that dividend's paid out, now the stock's worth $99. And you're like, wait a second. like, I didn't realize that was happening. Like, a lot of people don't realize that's happening. It's like, you can reinvest the dollar back into the company, but now the chocolate bar's whole and now you're in the same spot, but you created a taxable event. So I'm not big into dividends, but when I borrow funds against my home using the Smith maneuver, I like the feeling of more certainty. There's never certainty, right? Anything can happen, but I like the feeling of knowing that there's going to be a payout, and that payout is going to be at a higher amount monthly than I'm going to pay in interest personally. That is the elephant there that's sort of like holding me back from doing the right thing, which is putting it into like equity ETFs and shutting my eyes and never looking at it again, and just knowing that rationally it makes sense. And that's my elephant sort of going, I don't like that idea. But since every month I can see that, like, oh, I'm in like a private credit fund over here, like that private credit fund, or maybe it's a MIC if you're in private mortgages, or like whatever it is. And you're like, I see that, like, you know, that 9% getting paid out monthly, and my 4.5% on my HELOC getting paid out monthly, or costing me money monthly, and I'm seeing the arbitrage. Like, that allows me as the rider to move my elephant a little further down the path, right? And like, these are pieces that are so important, so that when we're out there and we're like contemplating different moves that we make, we have to be careful not to just pick absolutes and go like, you know, most people, you know, buy term, invest the difference is always the right move. And it's like, well, rationally, you know what? You're probably going to do better if you took every extra dollar in your world and did that. I'm with you on that. The problem is, I literally don't see 1% of the people we're chatting with actually doing that process. So it's great that you knew it, but if the path is blocked and you're not able to walk down that path, now you're nowhere. Like, you're not making any progress at all. And you're going to be in the worst scenario. You know what the best scenario is, but now you're in the worst scenario because there's no action being taken.
Yeah. Another example is like Dave Ramsey's debt snowball effect, is that, you know, the math says if you've got debt, you know, so the math says you should pay down the highest interest rate debt first, because
regardless of the balance,
interest, regardless of the balance. But he's, you know, if you ever listen to Dave Ramsey and his move is to say the math, and he agrees, the math is right there. But the problem with that is that it's hard to look at that, because maybe your largest debt, like the largest interest, is the largest debt, and it's going to take years to pay that down. Whereas over here, you might have a small debt, like another debt that's smaller than that, and you could actually pay that off within 2 years or a year if you contribute your money there. He's like, put all your money on that first, because that snowball effect of seeing the win, right? The habit of like, oh my gosh, I got a win out of that, and it feels good. It hits the endorphins to be like, move on to the next one, and then all of a sudden put your money on the next lowest one, and then that can build. The math says that's wrong, but the habit is what you're building towards, right. And that's the actual stick-to-itiveness that you need. And that's if you have, say, debt. Like he's talking about people trying to get out from under debt. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in not that situation, but it's about the habit. The other idea is like economists. The math says that it's completely wrong to think of sectioning off your finances in terms of buckets. So think of it like, sometimes, like I have this, like we've talked about this, is that I try to account for every single dollar I have in my tracking. So I track, like, that dollar went into that bucket, or I put this, you know, I put this savings bucket over here. I have a vacation bucket over here. I've got a bucket that's going to pay for my emergency fund, or my wealth reservoir bucket. And these buckets, you know, in the math says, like, they're all the same bucket, man. Like, it's all one pot of money, and it doesn't matter that it goes to these buckets. Like, the math says you're kind of crazy about that, but it's easier, and it's habit forming to visualize it in terms of those buckets, because the economists, the math people would say, like, if you think today the best use of that dollar is to go into your vacation fund or to pay for a vacation, then go pay for the vacation. Don't try to segment off your money into different buckets. Just pay for it the way that you want. Like, if today you got to pay the credit card bill, you pay the credit card bill. Today you got to pay the vacation fund, you pay the vacation fund. But he's like, don't they say don't think of it like that, but it's easier to think about that to live your life.
Right.
And that's the habit forming component, because it's like I can make a habit out of this to start putting money in different things, and it makes you feel good, makes you sleep at night. Like the math is different there than what it is. And I think that's our big message here is that when you think about the gap between the math or the rider and the elephant, is can you create what is the habit form that you can put into place to hit the goals of your vision component. So if it's like, where do I want to go? What habit can I commit to for this year or next year? That's the move. Like that's the better move to make than trying to like squeeze out every rational dollar. And don't get me wrong, I think knowing how to squeeze out the rational dollar is important. And that's probably why you're listening. But it's like, because that's what we try to do. But then knowing what the move is, once you know the math and once you know the strategies, that's whatever you can commit to, that's the move you want to make.
Yeah. And you did a great job. And I want to make sure that people are seeing the connection between the two sides of the brain, the quick thinking and the slow thinking, right? So the quick thinking is that when we create a habit, you're helping feed that part of the brain that likes to take control. Like that quick thinking brain is doing most of the work throughout the day. Why? Because it's the easiest. Right. So it's like, Steve Jobs wore the same golfer or whatever it was, polo shirt every single day, same black color. He never had to make any decision. It was a quick decision. So he had rationally thought about it. Don't care what the color is. And I don't care, I just want the same one every day. I go to the closet, boom, I put it in because it's easy. It takes less effort and energy, and he can focus his energy on other things. So the same thing is happening here. So whether you're sitting there looking at yourself and going like, if you want to pay down that mortgage, your primary mortgage as fast as possible, that's your elephant taking control, right? And it again, understand rationally whether that's the right move or not. But if you want to do it, go for it. Just be aware of what it may be, quote unquote, costing you, right? So if I'm taking a lot out of my corporation in order to do it, I'm paying a large tax bill in order to satisfy my elephant. What we want to do instead is go, okay, let's make sure the rider has the information he needs. And then you've got to use the rider to try to figure out, how am I going to use this information in order to help me overcome that elephant without necessarily like going too extreme where I'm not going to be able to do it at all, right? And I think this is one of the biggest pieces. Like if you can get that from this episode or this show, there's never going to be a perfect right or wrong way to do it. Now, rationally, there always is. There always is. But it's like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone who's doing it, quote unquote, perfect. And I want to use the example of the all-in equity ETF investor. I had one client who came and was like, rationally, they had we'll call it control of their elephant. Their elephant was very small, which was great. And I was like, fantastic. Hats off to you. They take like all of their money and they put it into equity ETFs. And they're like, I will not. And again, we'll see whether this is true or not. But on a downturn, they're not going to touch it. It's just going to stay. And mathematically, he'll be in a better spot than the vast majority of people that have any other dollar in any other place, likely over the long term. But here's the nuance and the problem is that mathematically, it makes even more sense for you to take the money out before the crash, right? So like if we go rationally, we want to talk rationally, the right move for that person is to pay attention to macroeconomics and to know that there's a high risk of the market going down. There are ways to do this. It's very incredibly difficult, and I'm not going to say that I know how. But if you did, you're going to be way ahead than keeping the money in and riding out the entire crash. So here's the problem. If you do it wrong, you've got a big problem. I would much rather see that, listen, your money goes where it goes. Things are going to happen the way they happen. But if you have other buckets, non-volatile buckets around that you can lean into to take advantage of those opportunities when they show up, you're going to be, in my opinion, miles ahead, and you may be able to actually pull that trigger. It is so much harder to lean into, let's say, debt. If you see your entire, investment portfolio go to 50% of its value within a week or a month, to be able to lean in and bring more funds from somewhere else through leverage in order to dump it on there. So why I say this is that staying diversified, understanding your buckets and understanding your own elephant, as we'll call it, so that you can make a habit that makes sense for you, knowing that there could be a little bit of money left on the table here or there, but it's actually way more money that you're taking because you're actually taking action instead of sitting back and waiting and never pulling the trigger.
That's a great message. And I think you mentioned it earlier, is that that's what we want to do here on the show. So if this is the first time you've listened to our show and this is the first episode you've listened to, then know that that's the lens that we try to come at from every single episode. Most of our episodes are a little bit more technical. Most of our episodes look at case study. Most of our episodes look at, the math and the strategy behind what we're trying to, what those secrets are out there in the tax world, the investing world, the business world, the finance world. And we try to bring those to you so you have that information to look at the rider, look at the elephant. But that's what we're hoping to do here in every single episode. And if you've listened to many episodes before, then I want you to kind of reflect. Like, do we do that? Like, have we done that in the past? And next time you listen to one, try to think about it from that lens. Is what does the rider say here in this episode, and what is the elephant saying for me? If you listen to other finance finance podcasts, it's likely you do. Then look at it from that lens too. Like, what can I commit to for habits? What's my rider saying? How is this episode addressing the rider, and how is it addressing the elephant? And is it addressing the pathway as well, which is the habit?
Hey, listen, and listen, friends, if you need some help teaching your rider and you need a little bit of help making the path manageable for your elephant, you should reach out to us for a discovery call over at CanadianWealthSecrets.com/discovery. Remember, right now, you can head over to the website, CanadianWealthSecrets.com/pathways, so that you can actually do your wealth health assessment, and you'll get a report to see where things are going well and where you might want to improve your wealth journey along the way. Of course, for our incorporated business owners, we do have a masterclass for you in how to understand your retained earnings and some of this very commonly used corporate strategies that we implement with our different clients. You can head over to CanadianWealthSecrets.com/masterclass, and you can dig into that 100% free at a self-paced level. And finally, just a reminder that everything on this show is education only and for entertainment purposes only. It is not to be construed as legal, tax, accounting, investment, financial, or other advice. And as a reminder, Kyle is a life licensed and accident and sickness insurance agent and the president of Canadian Wealth Secrets Incorporated.